I think Esteban Ocon personally shouldn't be in that seat
Bruh.
at all. So the breaking news is Valtteri is going to keep his seat, and Ocon is going to go to Renault. Now, not much else has come out. Again, this is being reported by a couple major outlets, though, and I think a lot of people are actually jumping the gun, but I do want to report on it as conjecture and rumor. It's being reported as fact, and I don't actually see it as that. I would not be surprised if this came out as more of just, it turns out it was actually speculation. So I've got the report, I've got the actual coverage here by Crash, a couple other outlets that cover motorsports almost exclusively have reported on this as well. Initially, it's being reported by Autobild. So again, this language is very strong, but when you actually kind of dig in to the actual details and you get pinged around and finally find the source, it's not actually that clear. So I do want to start with that. But rather than just make a video about conjecture and guessing, I do have a couple slides that I want to go through and some data to have a data conversation about. I think Esteban Ocon personally shouldn't be in that seat at all. And I know a lot that's going to rub the people the wrong way. And this channel is about data and facts, though. Leave your emotions aside, because now it's time to have a conversation about, let's look at the data, especially as it relates to his time racing Sergio Perez. So again, I've seen a lot of people make some of this content and there's so much flack. You can bring all the flack you want, just bring the data as well. And down in the comment section, I'll include the data sources so you can have them, or the actual data sheet. All the data sources are F1, but I'll include the data downloads if you want to go ahead and download them. I'll just go ahead and give that to you. You can post them on Instagram if you want. That's fine. Take credit. I don't care. So let's just briefly go through the story really quick, but it's actually in a different language. So, but I'll include the link in the comment section, the description section below too, from Autobild. But let's actually pull up some of the data to say, even if this is true, if it turns out he's going to Renault, which makes sense, it's a French manufacturer, it's a French driver. I think they're under a lot of pressure. Cyril is, and just it's his nation state, nation owned car company, car F1 company. So. The car is controlled by France, so they're under a lot of pressure and they have to perform. And I think a young driver in there is gonna be at least what they need on paper from the optics standpoint. But should he even be there? So let's look at the first piece of data I'll pull up. So I think there's three main reasons why I don't think he should replace Ocon. So you have to remember, or replace Valtteri. So whoever gets in the silver arrow, whoever's in the Mercedes seat has to be able to win a world championship. I don't think Ocon can win a world championship. He struggled against Sergio Perez, and that's nothing against Sergio Perez. I actually think Sergio Perez is the most underrated driver on the grid, in my opinion. But all that aside, he will be in a Mercedes, and you're replacing Valtteri Bottas, who has trouble thus far usurping Hamilton. I mean, he's not Nico Rosberg in terms of holding him to the fire, race in and race out. But do you really think that Esteban Ocon's going to do any better than Valtteri? I actually don't think so. But all that aside, you also have to remember Hamilton's going to have a huge say in this, and Mercedes wants wins as well. Mercedes is going to want cohesion, consistency, and when we go through the data and we look at the race results, and at least at Force India, and compare him to Sergio Perez, we can see that the consistency isn't always there. It was in 2017 where he finished 90% of his races in the points, right? And I think he actually holds a record for, since his career started, all the way up to, 27? I can't remember the actual number, but he holds a record for finished races from his career start in Formula One. So it's not necessarily that he hasn't been consistent. It's that in 2018 he did struggle with some car issues, but he had some on the track problems. And you have a couple people being quoted as saying he's got these problems as a driver in terms of the situations that at least happen around him. They're not always his fault. You think of Gasly in 2018. We're not talking about whose fault it is, but he is involved. And obviously everyone's seen Drive to Survive. So you've got the incident where he's trying to unlap himself in Brazil. So just in some situations he doesn't even need to be in. So again, if you're an Ocon fan, you can't really disagree with that. He doesn't need to be in some of those situations. You can say that about any driver, but that would be the comeback to anyone saying about that driver. So the point is, I don't think Mercedes or Hamilton want to even risk that. So he's having trouble with Perez. At least in his last F1 season, he had trouble on the track with some incidents. And then on top of all that, I think Renault's interest is going to be mighty there. I think they're going to have a lot of sway, and I think it's France owned. They're going to want a young Frenchman looks good on the optics to the front office. So he's very talented. It's not that he's not talented. It's that when you talk about replacing Valtteri, that's what we're talking about. Can Ocon win a world championship? I don't think so, and that's nothing against him. Everyone's going to say, well, let's talk about his qualifying in 2008. I get it, we're going to, but when you actually think about him racing Lewis Hamilton, I don't really think there's a chance. That's not to say he's not a great driver. That's not to say he couldn't do well. That's just to say replacing Valtteri Bottas. So I'll say that 4 times. Someone in the comment section will mishear me, but let's look at the second piece of data, which the second piece of data we're going to actually look at. So again, I'm going to pull up next. Actually, I'll just show you so everyone doesn't get all upset. We're going to actually go through some of the I'll call them the smoking guns, some of the stuff that matters the most, like DNFs and the qualifying record, which totally flipped. But to be fair, let's look at what it looks like on paper in 2018 against Perez in his last season at Racing Point. So what you're looking at here is in the blue, you've got Esteban Ocon. In orange, you've got Sergio Perez. And I've got the asterisk here because obviously this is Baku. This is everyone's favorite argument. We'll touch it and I'll hit immediately. Just that's out. And this analysis can even exclude that. And it's still going to turn out the same. But that's where you've got Esteban Ocon, who actually crashed out, who swiped Kimi and turn 4 after qualifying above Sergio, which is the name of the game pretty much all season. Again, it was pretty close though. They were I think the third fastest of the duos in qualifying in terms of their splits. But you actually see Sergio take 15 points in Baku, and he ended up the head-to-head. Just really quick, looking at the data, was 62-49 in 2018, with Sergio in 8th and Esteban in 12th. So. Let's go ahead and look at the rest of the races, though. So you see some consistency in the blue and orange. Obviously, this is a stacked chart, but the races where you actually had Esteban Ocon actually DNFing. So I've got them right here. And in this analysis, we see the DNFs for Ocon in Azerbaijan, Spain, France, Singapore, and Abu Dhabi. Yes, he's got the 6. 3 were mechanical, 3 were on-track incidents. So in the races, and that was the other part of the analysis, in the races where you had him DNF that weren't on-track incidents, you had that's actually Ocon having those incidents. You had Sergio Perez picking up about, I think it was 10 points. So keep that in the back of your mind. And then the other data point, which is actually on this sheet here, is... You've got Sergio Perez, actually interesting for the Ocon fans out there. Ocon averaging, his net average by finish was 3.27 points, which is, again, this is by finish. You had Sergio Perez at 3.26. Now, I think a lot of people are going to, obviously there's going to be an objection to that data point to say, the ones that, the races that you don't finish are of particular importance. Again, I think that's true. I think this is an amalgamation of all the data. And when you look at drivers, you have to look at everything. You can't look at DNFs only. You can't look at points only. You can't look at, grid finish only. So it's looking at all these things at once. And I think not many people do that, but I'm going to start doing that here. So the DNFs, I said 6. I'm sorry. It's actually 5 DNFs. Let's go ahead and count them again so I'm not crazy. You've got France, Singapore, US, Abu Dhabi, Azerbaijan, and Spain. So it is 6. Okay, good. So I'm not crazy. This is actually just wrong. So I'll go ahead and update that before I release it to you guys. That's actually 6. Perez is 2. And the interesting point that I kind of really dug into, and I stopped myself because you shouldn't have to look that hard to form a story, but you've got 16-5 Sergio Perez actually being out qualified. Again, I'll actually switch that for you. So it's Sergio actually owning the qualifying battle and not. I'm sorry, it's actually Ocon owning the qualifying battle, not Sergio. So I'll fix that. But you've got Ocon 16-5 out qualifying him. So that's of particular importance. But I think that's one of the things that Mercedes is going to have a problem with. If you are someone that's out qualifying your partner, a lot of things that matter the most, especially in a really good car, is racecraft. And I think that's going to come with age. And I think that's where everyone's banking on I think that's where everyone's banking on Ocon being a very talented. He is a very talented driver. When you think about world champion, you think about racecraft and how many seasons in does it take to really gain that racecraft. Well, I've seen a couple of people try to compare some of the world's best drivers and say, look, this is what they did. So it's you got Lewis Hamilton famously racing. He was at the time Lewis was racing Fernando Alonso. So that's a tough start. But then you've got Vettel, who actually won for Toro Rosso. Which is a really good start again. So when you look at the best drivers in the world, it's really hard to compare. Obviously, it's really not that fair to compare, but we're comparing Ocon to Sergio Perez, and we're still having trouble doing some of that. So I think that's one thing to keep in mind. Again, I'm not saying he's not a good driver. I'm just saying when you think about who should be replacing Valtteri, because the point would be to put someone in that car who can either win, challenge, but ultimately take them to a Constructors' Championship. I think Constructors' Championship, fine, but I don't think the challenge is going to be any better, and I actually think he'd be at risk when you put him up against Leclerc. Like, do you really think he's going to outclass Leclerc that much in that car? I'm honestly not that sure. So I'll update a couple of these data points, and I'll make sure to make sure that's correct, and I'll send that over to you guys. It'll be in the description box. But yeah, again, as you go through this, you'll be able to see this data, and you'll be able to see the stack chart to see the race finishes. And a lot of people say in Baku, Sergio Perez picked up 15 points to Ocon's 0, and that was it. Well, you've also got not all of Ocon's actual DNFs he's got one DQ based on a fuel load problem, but not all of his DNFs are actually mechanical. So he's got some incidents that are a problem too, which is everyone in 2018, a lot of drivers had reliability issues. Daniel Ricciardo had reliability issues. Sergio Perez, I mean, honestly, he didn't have the worst of reliability issues. That's true, but he also capitalized in the races where his partner was not there. He picked up 10 extra points. And at the end of the day, I'm sorry, but when you actually look at Baku and the 15 points, I think it's pretty clear, or at least 50-50, that he swiped Kimi. Now, he out-qualified Sergio. So if he's in that race, if he takes care of his car, he's in that race, he picks up the fluke points. So I don't really like the argument that because, those were lucky points. They weren't. You have to be there to get lucky. And I think it's likely that Ocon would have been there. And it's the same argument I use with George Russell when you think about the 1 point that Kubica picked up. Had Russell not made the mistake, he would have got the point. You still have to be there to get the point to be quote-unquote lucky, and you can't take it away from Kubica, who capitalized on Russell's mistake. It's the same in Baku. He didn't have to do what he did there, and it's hard to make an argument where he couldn't have avoided that. So if he's in that race, he actually probably picks up those points over Sergio, unless racecraft takes over, in which the conversation's over anyway, because if he's ahead of him, then he outraced him after Ocon actually outqualified Perez. So I think there will be a lot of interesting discussion, and hopefully you guys bring your opinions. I'll update the data. I'll send you this information, add to it. You can tweak it. You can tear it apart. You can amend it or just discredit it. But if you like this video, share it and subscribe. I'll be sure to be doing a lot more of these analysis based on the data specifically. I've got big spreadsheets based on all this information. I've actually pulled 2017. 2017 was a little bit more quiet. And honestly, I thought after the 2017 season, I really did think Ocon would have been a world champion. But coming back from 2018, I didn't see it there. And again, he's a great driver. That's not the point of the video. The point is not to say he's not a good driver. He is a great driver. When you think about him at Mercedes replacing Valtteri, I don't think it's going to happen. So this video opened up with a bit of the conjecture and rumors, and it looks credible. So I do want to make a video talking about the fact that it looks like Ocon will be in Renault, which I think is actually the best spot for him. But regardless of what happens, I want to make sure that that on this channel we're going to make these calls, we're going to look at this data, and we're going to be able to come with this opinion. But at the end of the day, we really want a discussion. So whatever you think, leave in the comment section below. I've seen a lot of people already. I've had these conversations with people about some of the data that I think could skew it, some of the data that I think, personally, in my opinion, the DNFs do matter. And I think especially psychologically to a young driver, I don't discredit his ability to drive well. I just think in terms of replacing Valtteri, I think it'd be the same thing, if not worse, but I don't think it'll be better with his performance next to Lewis's. So that's just my take. Take it or leave it, but let me know what you think, and I'll be sure to make some more content, and we'll see you guys soon. Thanks, guys.